Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Wednesday, the 26th of July. I'm Aidan Macdonald, and today I'm joined by a special guest, TCW columnist Kevin McKenna. Kevin, how are you?
Aye, good, Aidan. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. Obviously, plenty to speak about today, such as the breaking news that's kind of went live in the last hour, just before we came on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Obviously, being that Celtic have confirmed the signing, as we suspected, we knew he'd completed a medical over the weekend of Legia Warsaw and Polish under-21 international Maik Nawrocki. Hopefully, I've not butchered that pronunciation there. But before we obviously get into that, guys, just for anybody that's interested, the ticker tape down below has the details of our latest subscription offer. You can support the Celtic Way, support top quality journalism covering the club you all love. The current deal we're running is £18 a year. Part of that, you'll get access to tactical reports, scouting analysis, such as one that was recently done on Nawrocki by Stuart Ross, big interviews from Tony, columns from Kevin, videos from Ryan. So we've got you basically covered from every sort of angle, whether data's your bag or you're more into like opinion and match analysis. Obviously, the fact we're able to do these free videos daily is because of subscribers, choosing to give up the hard-earned cash to the website, which we obviously really appreciate. So, yeah, as long as the subscriptions keep ticking over, we're still able to do these live videos, guys. So we really appreciate anybody that's able to subscribe. And if you want to find out a bit more information about that, ticker tape down below has the URL, which is www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. The details are also in the description of this video as well. So get yourself involved in that, guys, if that interests you. Now, Kevin, as we all just mentioned before the intro, Celtic confirming the signing of Maik Nawrocki on a 5-year deal. Firstly, obviously it's been speculated for a while. There was photos of him in Lennoxtown over the last couple of days, so we've known it's a certainty. But firstly, how do you feel about that? Are you happy? Do you think he's somebody who can come in and challenge to be a first-team regular?
Yeah, I think Brendan Rodgers is seeing him as straight into the first team pool. He's not a development player. He's got a great pedigree. He comes from a very good club, Legia Warsaw, who of course scalped us a few years ago, both home and away. And he's already been recognised at international level by his own country. So he'll be featuring a lot, and it provides great competition. We know that there's going to be an issue over Cameron Carter-Vickers starting the first league game against Ross County. So it just kind of gives you a sense of reassurance that every position, and this was a feature of Ange Postecoglou's time, that by the time Ange left us, almost every position, if not every position, was covered, and not just by reserve, old kind of what we would once have called reserve players. We've got a fully functioning 25-man squad, all of whom would be expected to step in no matter what and hit the ground running. And I think this signing is a continuation of that, so I'm delighted.
Do you think he is somebody that's maybe going to be challenging Carl Starfelt? Obviously, there's no doubt that when Cameron Carter-Vickers is fit, which I know we're going to come on to discuss a wee bit later, his current injury situation, but when he's fit, I think everybody would dispute he's one of the first names on the team sheet. Do you think this is going to be a real challenge for Starfelt? It's something that might actually potentially bring the best out of him?
Yeah. I'm not one of those critics of Starfelt over the last couple of seasons, because he got off to a bit of a rocky start with us. I think that too many of our supporters allowed that rocky start to kind of colour their view of him. But I thought he was very good last season. But yeah, he's not as certain and he's not as assured as Cameron Carter-Vickers. But Cameron Carter-Vickers was potentially the player of the season. If he had been voted player of the season in Scotland last season, no one would have been surprised. So yeah, I think there was the occasional game last season with Carroll where you kind of got the impression that he knew he's not really going to be challenged. His first team place wasn't really in any doubt, and yeah, there was the odd mistake that we saw, which didn't prove too costly, but yeah, he'll know that Brendan Rodgers has put down a marker, and also Rodgers hasn't worked with Carol Starfelt, so he'll want to be convinced by him, and it would be it'd be unfair of him. It'd be unfair if Starfelt wasn't the first choice at the start of the season. But let's see. We've got a very after Ross County, Celtic have got quite a testing schedule. So all of the players that Brendan Rodgers starts with against Ross County, they will be tested to the max within the course of the next month or so, and that's even before we hit the Champions League. And it doesn't. That doesn't. I know there's been one or two comments about just how tough Celtic's opening schedule is compared to other teams, but it doesn't bother me at all, because by the time we get into the Champions League, we need to be ready. And if we're being tested at home and we've had a few pretty tough games before then, it'll give us the test that we need going into the Champions League. So,
yeah, no, I completely agree, Kevin, particularly with your comments on Starfelt there. I think he's been a phenomenal sign from Celtic since he joined. I'm always of the opinion that if you were getting somebody at that age that is going to be flawless in every aspect and not make a mistake, they're probably not going to beat Celtic. They're going to be, at Manchester City or something like that. And I think a thing that some people maybe forget is he's sort of right-footed quite often, having to play as a left-sided centre-back, which I think is why he can look a bit lopsided sometimes when he's playing. But I think he copes with it relatively well for the most part. He also obviously has made a few mistakes. I think probably last season when he gave away the penalty against Rangers, it wasn't costly in the long run, but also at the time, it led to Rangers going 2-1 up in the game at Hogmanay, just after Hogmanay, at New Year, I should say, and people were a wee bit concerned, but and over the course, he was pretty solid last season beside Carl Vickers. And yeah, I think just your comments about the run of fixtures there, I think it is a positive, because you're going away to Ibrox, you're going away to Pittodrie, the teams that finished second and third last season, probably your two toughest away fixtures in the league. Not only are you getting, assuming both those teams are going to finish in the top six, you're getting the kind of first run of those games out the way, early doors. But like you say, it is decent enough competition before going into the Champions League. So, yeah, I think on both those aspects you're spot on. And yeah, Ryan McGinley, actually, he yesterday for the newsletter, which just went live on the website today, people can read he wrote a kind of defensive Carol Starfelt, making a lot of the similar points that you've just brought up there. You're just saying that over the course he's pretty solid. And he also kind of looked at, even though Celtic were quite poor at the back in that spell after they won the league last season, Starfelt actually in those games was taking quite a decent leadership role. And if you go and look back at it, none of the mistakes really came from anything he was doing. It was a mix of sort of Kobayashi, I think Ralston struggled a bit, Joe Hart, and then when Iwata was in there, when Starfelt was playing those games, he was actually pretty good. And that was one of the probably first times he was having to take a senior leadership role in the centre-back position, because it usually would have been Cameron Carter-Vickers, and then there was obviously a spell when Carter-Vickers was out last season, but Starfelt was also injured as well. So I think he did show that he's got leadership qualities there. As much as fans are going to be understandably excited about the arrival of Maik Nawrocki, who looks a very good player, we obviously had him scouted recently. But it's understandable fans are going to want to see him kind of maybe in straight away. And I imagine he will be involved quite quickly, particularly with Cameron Carter-Vickers still having a knock. But I think in the long term, it's still going to be Carol Starfelt's position, with Nawrocki trying to work in and get ahead of him. But, as we're mentioning, it's really positive to have competition, because we've seen examples in the past under Brendan Rodgers. The most obvious one that probably comes to mind was when James Forrest and Patrick Roberts were both sort of jostling for the right wing position, and they both were phenomenal. particularly James Forrest, that maybe got the best out of him. So I think competition breeds success in sport in general, but particularly football, and the fact that maybe Starfelt, who was once a certainty, is going to have to just not assume he's always going to be starting, I'm sure won't be a bad thing for him or the defence in total, really.
Yeah. Yeah, the point about James Forrest is well made. I was quite glad to see him get a year's contract extension. You know, he was Scottish Player of the Year in 2019, and it's good to have somebody in the dressing room who's not just seen as being on the fringes of the squad or there on sentiment. I think we parted company with ideas of sentiment a few years ago just because of the demands of competition and trying to get into the Champions League. It's good to have a Scottish player who's been at the club all of that time, who's got great habits, who's got the best out of his career, out of his ability, and having somebody like that in the dressing room, especially when you've got an influx of players from overseas and young players, you can't really put a value on having somebody like James Forrest at that age, of that experience, who's played in his entire career at Celtic. The concept of players spending their entire careers at clubs, even at Scottish clubs, is unheard of these days. So when you have one like that, you know, who can talk about the traditions, who can have their own memories, who can communicate what this means to the fans, you can't put a value on it at all in the dressing room. And I'm delighted that he's going to be around for another season at least.
I think as well, even probably something as basic as having another homegrown player for your Champions League quota. I believe it's 8 players in total. 4 of them can be homegrown. So somebody like David Turnbull, I guess, would fall into that. He obviously, wasn't in the Celtic Youth Academy, but Scotland International. He was at Motherwell. I think probably as much as maybe people would be keen to see somebody like James McCarthy move on at the moment, he also falls into that category, given he also came through the ranks at Hamilton. And you need 4 players that actually came through Celtic's own academy, which right now you've got McGregor, you've got Forrest, you've got Ralston, and Stephen Welsh would also fit that bracket, as well as obviously players like, Rocco Vata that are coming through, Ben Summers. But yeah, I think people over the course were relatively happy to see Forrest getting that extension. He's also got his testimonial coming up, which against Atletico Bilbao, which I think will be not only a good night for Forrest, but a very good test for Celtic.
Yeah.
Playing a team in La Liga who I know they've been in the Copa del Rey final in the last couple of years. I believe they've won it in the last 4 or 5 years as well. So a very good team. I think that's the ideal tie, as well as the Wolves match on Saturday. I think playing a Premier League opposition, then a La Liga side, is the perfect kind of end of pre-season. Really, as you're warming up to the sort of real fun beginning next week against Ross County. But yeah, it should be a good night, and obviously good for Forrest, but also a good test for Celtic, Kevin. And I think James Forrest, he should have had his testimonial a couple of years ago, but it was just also during COVID with all the restrictions and stuff. So I'm sure, are you kind of quite happy to see that he's finally getting the chance to get over that milestone?
Yeah. I've got mixed views, obviously, about testimonials in general. We're talking about very well rewarded, players, but on the other hand, as I'd said before, there were probably occasions when James Forrest, could have moved, could have made quite a lot of money with a decent transfer, but he's always made it clear that this is where he wanted to be. He's been a great example because, at various points in his career, he's not been first choice, or he's had to spend a significant amount of time out of the team. He's lost form on a couple of occasions, but you never hear him complaining. You never hear him questioning. Being at Celtic, there aren't any kind of briefings in the press. I know from speaking to football writers one or two contacts in the game, that he's very, very well respected by all his peers, and that includes a lot of players who don't play for Celtic. So if anybody, if anybody deserves a testimonial, then it's definitely him. And the fact that it's a friendly, but it's very close to the start of the season, and it will be quite competitive because Athletic Bilbao are in the same boat as us. It's a very competitive league that they're in. They want to be among the European places in La Liga, and they'll be coming here to ask questions, the same questions of their players and their new signings as we're asking of ours.
Yeah, I think it's kind of ramping up at the right time for Celtic. Obviously, they started with the sort of pre-season camp in Portugal. There was at least one game that took place. I know there was potentially two, but one that we've seen highlights of against obviously a team in the top flight in Portugal, but I believe they finished pretty near the bottom last season. Then it ramped up playing Yokohama F. Marinos, also in Japan, in that season heat, a very good side. I think everybody was maybe a bit disappointed with the result, but given the circumstances, I think Celtic still did show there was positives to take. And then you maybe taking on Gamble Saka, maybe a slightly weaker side, but still you're having to compete in that environment. Obviously, Celtic played a bit better. And then obviously you're going to be playing Wolves and then Athletic Club. So I think it is good, probably the way the pre-season. Whether or not it was planned to go exactly like this, I don't know, but it seems to sort of be ramping up at the right time, which is exactly what you want before playing Ross County. Just before we move on to maybe stuff on Carter Vickers, it'd be just to go through some of the quotes that had been kind of released by Celtic after the announcement of Nawrocki. So firstly, there's something from Brendan Rodgers. He was saying, it's another very good signing for us and we're delighted to have brought him to the club. He's a very highly rated young player and someone who we believe will be a great addition to the squad. He's also a player I'm very much aware of, having seen him play for Legia Warsaw in the Europa League, and I know he was very keen to move to Celtic, so we're looking forward to working with him. I think Kevin, Ryan and I, and Tony as well, to be fair, last week, when it was the announcement he'd completed a medical, were discussing that it seems like this is probably the first full-on Brendan Rodgers signing of his second spell.
Yeah.
And I've got no doubt he did have final say on, Tilio, Yang and Kwon, etc. Because we know what was kind of happening in his first spell and players were kind of being given to him when they clearly didn't want them. So I'm sure he did still get the final decision. But I think this is clearly somebody that he's had in his head in advance, given by the fact he's actually mentioned in that press release, and we already knew that Legia Warsaw played Leicester a couple of years ago in the Europa League. This does feel like somebody he's went to the scouting team with and said, I think they can fit into our system. And then he's obviously, they've went and had a wee look at him. So I guess, would you kind of be thinking that going forward now, the rest of this transfer window, it's probably going to be a similar boat of players in terms of it's going to be Brendan Rodgers' targets, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that the process of getting Brendan Rodgers was quite prolonged, that from first contact until he actually put pen to paper, you have to assume there was a lot of intense discussion about, from Celtic's perspective, what Brendan Rodgers' vision would be for the club, how he saw the next 2 or 3 years, how much time he could guarantee us. But from Brendan Rodgers' perspective, he'd been out the game for a few months, and I think his initial idea was to have a sabbatical of a year before going back into the game. And he's a stickler for details. Maybe over much, Brendan. So you have to assume that those several months that he was out the game, he was studying the game throughout the planet, ready for when he was going to get back into football, that he would be armed with a full analysis and appraisal of where the talent was, who was available. He would have been speaking to various agents. He would have just been maintaining a working knowledge of the game across the planet. So Celtic were getting the benefit of that. And Brendan will have come with a list of names at the front of his mind. Okay, he would have categorised those, because if he was going to go into a Premiership club, an English Premiership club with tens and tens of millions pounds to spend, then obviously there's certain players that become available just simply if you're in the Premiership. And I've no doubt that Brendan Rodgers would have had an offer from a Premiership club if he'd waited another 6 months or so. But likewise, he will have had a list of players that he knew were within Celtic's structure, their budget, and this is the first one. I've no doubt that there will be others. I've no doubt that he will also have an eye on the January transfer window about possible players he can bring in. But he will also have asked questions, and I'm pretty sure he would have spoken to Ange Postecoglou as well about the especially the two South Korean players that we brought in, Kwon and Yang, just what it was, why Ange Postecoglou had started that process, what his own ideas were. Brendan Rodgers doesn't leave anything to chance. And you have to assume that he would have had to, the club will have had to have satisfied him that he would have mastery over not just all transfers, but the structure of those transfers, the scouting of them. And that fills me with a deep sense of security as well, because that wasn't always the case in previous years prior to Ange. And, we don't need to mention any names, but there was always this more than a suspicion that the manager didn't always have control or the final say over who was coming to the club and who was leaving.
Yeah, of course. I think the structure is a big thing. Brendan Rodgers touched on it in his press conference, didn't he? He kind of maybe didn't word it exactly like this, but he said last time it was a bit confusing in terms of how things went, but it was very clear. And he said Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay, when they went to meet him in Mallorca, sold it to him. Very clear structure. This is what we do now. This is how it worked under Ange. This is how it would work under yourself if you were to come back. And I like to think that Brendan Rodgers, he knows he's under a lot of pressure coming back to Celtic in terms of a lot of fans. People are going to be kind of judgmental of him for, some would say, understandable reasons. He's not going to be able to get that grace period that Ange got at the start, being able to lose 3 of his first 6 games. I know we don't have any Champions League qualifiers, but so I suppose he doesn't have that to worry about. But he knows he's going to have to basically hit the ground running and be pretty much flawless. So he's not going to want to be at any situation where he can't get the players that he wants or he feels he's not being supported. So as much as we have discussed so far on the briefing kind of over the summer, Tony, Ryan and I, that maybe we're hoping Celtic to do a wee bit more business. This was also before the 3 signings being confirmed in the last couple of days. But hopefully that's it ramping up now. I think the squad does still need a wee bit of TLC in a few areas. The goalkeeper being one, which I'm seeing a lot of people discussing in the comments. And fingers crossed now that this is going to be Celtic kind of going full pelt between now and the end of the transfer window, getting players in. Because as you pointed out, it's the Champions League's not that far away, and you still need to get guys in. They need to get obviously comfortable living in Scotland if they're coming from Europe or further afield. Get used to playing the system, the coaching. So yeah, I'm hoping that really, I'm not expecting 3 players a week every week for the next 6 weeks or anything like that. Of course not. But I'm hoping that there's going to be a few more names coming in between now and deadline day. Yeah,
I'm hearing a lot from friends and family that they would like to see another striker brought in, especially if Kyogo's going to be out for a little at some point with this shoulder injury. I know that Brendan Rodgers is saying he'll leave it up to him, but at some point we're going to be missing him. I think people forget that the O is his scoring rate for minutes played is very good, but he's by no means the finished article. He's still young. Probably need another season just to establish himself, but I would like to see us in the market for a quality striker. I know it's easier said than done because strikers of any ability in any decent league are at a premium, and you can add an extra £5-6 million onto their prices from what you would be paying if it was like a defensive midfielder or a defender or a goalkeeper. But yeah, this is still another several weeks to go before the transfer window shuts, and I'd be surprised if there wasn't at least two good players, two seasoned pros who will be joining us between now and then.
I think the striker point is an important one. Even if Kyogo's okay and he doesn't need surgery, it's looking like he probably will at some point. There's also the Asian Cup in January. There's a good chance Kyogo, Maida and Hatate, based off the fact that they were recently all called up, that they'll probably will be again. He's not had a lot of caps for South Korea, but he's been in the last couple of squads and he's featured. So you'd have to imagine that if he continues his scoring form at the end of last season, he'll be in contention. There's even players like Tilio who have been in Australian squads in the past. He could be away, even going further back. The two new South Korean players that have arrived, Jang and Kwon, they might have not really been involved as far as I know so far. I think Kwon might have had a cap. I'd need to double check that, but they could be away. So a lot of players, Celtic can obviously postpone those games. I think there's a certain amount of players away. I think it's at least 6. But if they don't want to do that, you'd have to imagine a striker will need to be a priority, Kevin, even if it was getting somebody in the short term. Either that or you would be having to hope that one of those players didn't get called up, which would be a daft situation to find yourself in when you've known for over a year that the Asian Cup was going to play a big part in Celtic's plans, given the players that they've obviously signed. So, yeah, I think a striker could be a priority, whether or not that be somebody on loan. I know we probably don't want to see a return to loans that you're unlikely to sign, that the format we've had the last couple of seasons of options to buy Jota, Carter Vickers. If they're successful, Jens and Abelgard, if they're not, they can then just kind of leave mid-season. But yeah, I think a striker has probably got to be up there, Kevin, in terms of players that they want to bring in for a variety of reasons, but the Asian Cup sort of being one of them.
And we will just have to make sure that we're about a dozen points ahead before the Asian Cup starts, just to settle the nerves. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
I mean, you'll take any lead, but yeah, just give us a double digit lead, Brendan, and we'll have no worries come the Asian Cup.
Indeed. Kind of a lot of discussion we've had recently on the briefing, and people have been, the commenters as well, have been saying it is about a goalkeeper. Obviously, Celtic were getting linked with Lovakovic, who the Dinamo Zagreb Croatian national team goalkeeper. It looked like he was going to Fenerbahce, which kind of had priced us out, you would imagine, wages-wise, even if not transfer fee-wise. But there was reports last night, not sure how concrete they are, that deal wasn't quite done, and Celtic were still interested. I guess not even on Lovakovic in general, but do you think goalkeepers maybe another priority position like a striker for Celtic in this transfer window?
I'm not sure. Joe Hart's been great for us, and he'll start as first choice no matter what. But it was interesting that we've got that we gave a new deal to Scott Bain. Somebody showed me a bit of footage, which I like to see every so often, of his performance when we beat Rangers 3-2 at Ibrox, when both Moussa Dembele and Odsonne Edouard scored. And the saves that he made in that game, and you begin to think, what was it that led to him not being first choice keeper? And you'd be struggling to put your finger on a run of games where he wasn't good. was entitled to feel unhappy that that Barkas was first choice for that calamitous several months in the COVID season. But yeah, a club getting into the Champions League needs 3 solid goalkeepers, and Joe Hart at some point this season or the following season, will probably have to be, we'll have to be looking at his, how often or how long he can sustain the high level of performances, and I think Joe Hart knows that as well. So, yeah, we should be taking that position seriously, because it's a position that Celtic don't often or haven't always taken seriously, because we're always on the attack, so it doesn't really need to matter so much. But those days are long gone. So whether we get one in this transfer window or the next one, it's good that we're looking, and it's good that it's we're looking at somebody established who can come straight in as and when they're required. But we got our fingers burned with Barkas, given the amount of money that we paid for him, the wages that he was on. If you look at the reasons why we were so poor in that COVID season, people overlook the fact that if Fraser Foster had agreed to join us at the start of that season, we're looking at a difference of maybe 6 to 9 points better off between August and January that season. And that, I've already written this, I think that wasn't all Neil Lennon's fault, but that's a story for another day, and a story that maybe Neil at some point will give us the full details of. So yeah, let's keep looking. Is it a priority for this transfer window? I don't know, but it soon will become a priority.
Yeah, I think with Livakovic, even if he doesn't go to Fenerbahce, I've maybe got a feeling it might just be a wee bit out of Celtic's price range. Croatian national team goalkeeper getting we're going to say a Champions League semi-final, a World Cup semi-final.
Yes.
He's playing Dinamo Zagreb, one of the top teams in his country. He looks very good with the ball at his feet. I can't help but think that there could end up being a Saudi Arabian angle on this if he doesn't go to Fenerbahce. He might be seen as they can get one of the kind of most promising goalkeepers in Europe right now over to that league to continue to promote it. And if that becomes the case, which is just speculation by myself, there's not been any links to that, but if that was to be the case, Celtic would be completely priced out. So I don't know if he will be somebody the club would be able to go for, as much as I'd be absolutely delighted. That would be a sort of marquee name. I mean, the fees that are being quoted are between 8 and 9 million, which would be, the same as Celtic paid for their record player at the moment, which is still odds on Edward. So, yeah, I think maybe a player of that profile would be brilliant, but I just don't know if, in particular, he would be the one. Another one that's been mentioned was Angus Gunn. He's obviously played for Norwich. He's looked okay for Scotland so far. Probably not had a lot of saves to make. I thought in the Spain game, he equipped himself really well, playing against top players. Made a couple of really good stops. His distribution looks good now. It's different the way he'd probably been asked to play with Scotland as much as he would be with Brendan Rodgers. Steve Clark plays it out from the back sometimes, not all the time, whereas we know pretty much a bit like Ange Rodgers is kind of out from the back at all costs, no matter the situation. So distribution-wise, I wouldn't be able to say confidently he was high level at that. He's looked fine for Scotland so far. He's another one that's kind of floated around. But yeah, I do agree with you that if it wasn't this summer transfer window, you'd need to be looking for January with the absolute latest being next summer.
Yes.
Because I think by then Joe Hart's contract would have ran out if he's not offered an extension. So yeah, Benjamin. I don't know what's going to happen with Benjamin Siegrist, to be honest. He seems to be kind of just in the fringes, but yeah, it's definitely a position that will need to be addressed at some point.
I mean, we're talking here on the assumption that that no more of our kind of big players are going to be tempted away. The kind of introduction the emergence of the Saudi Arabian market presents a challenge, not just to, if you can see teams like Paris Saint-Germain facing a challenge to hold on to their best player, and you look at the top quality players that are going there, as well as the kind of players like Jota. You can see almost a game plan with these players. If they're young enough, they can spend a couple of years in Saudi, make a life-changing, life-assuring amount of money, and then come back into the so-called recognised leagues that are still at a relatively young age, and play there. And that model is going to tempt players of that ability, of whom we've got 3 or 4, as well as others, of our kind of inner station, if you like, Ajax, Anderlecht, Benfica, Porto, etc. So, I hope that we can hang on to the players we've got, but you can't really take anything for granted. And Brendan Rodgers will have been looking at that as well, and that will also inform his thinking about what players we need to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably, I'm going to guess, maybe 2 of the players you're referring to there would be Hatate and Carter Vickers, in terms of mainstay players that you don't really want to lose.
And maybe O'Reilly as well, so maybe with maybe Carter Vickers being injured at the moment might help us this season. But you have to imagine that, and again, it works to Celtic's model of recruitment, that if those players continue their progress with us, and again, if they turn in good performances in the Champions League, that we've got to kind of look at how much money we can make on them over the next 24 months. That's just the model. Nawrocki being brought in, 5-year contract. If he fulfills his potential and we get 2, maybe 3 seasons of him, we'd be hoping to make 10 million on that in due course. That's just the model that we're at, to maintain our sustainability and that balance of not just maintaining financial stability, but forming a squad that can compete and do themselves justice in the Champions League. And we weren't far away from that last season. That's just the reality we live in. The Saudi Arabian money that's being flung about just complicates matters a bit further. Nobody's immune from that. That includes ourselves, as we've seen with Jota.
Yeah, you are completely right, and it's obviously Celtic's player trading model. Jota, they'll point to that as being a brilliant example of how it worked. Paid $6.5 million for him, got 25 in terms of the total fee that they received. Obviously, we know quite a significant percentage of that was going to Benfica, but at least Celtic were still pocketing between 18 and 19 million, which is pretty good for that kind of player trading aspect. But it's all well and good the club getting the money in. They've got to effectively spend it. Based off profile, I would say at the moment, going out and spending 45 million on Nawrocki looks like, just from the eye test and from some of the data, a positive sign and money well spent at the moment. But I think there's got to be a few more players like that. And yeah, it's also important that you don't just get the whole kind of spine of your team ripped out, to be honest. But we know Kyogo's signed a long-term deal, thankfully, so I don't think he's going to be going anywhere anytime soon.
No,
but yeah, Hatate and Carter Vickers are probably the 2, and O'Reilly, as you mentioned, are probably the 3 that are highlighted as players that you really don't want to lose. Carter Vickers' injury, I think at least for the summer transfer window, assuming he is going to still be out for a period of time, would probably maybe put teams off coming in for him. Now, it's not always been like that case in the past. Kieran Tierney also went to Arsenal when he was injured. He hadn't played for 2 or 3 months at that point. But I think hopefully Carter Vickers should be okay for this season.
Yeah.
Hattati and O'Reilly, it's still a bit up in the air, to be honest, unless one of them's coming out and signing another long-term deal, which they might feel they don't really need to do because they've still got, 3.5 years.
Which is great, and it's great Celtic being in that position where they're the final arbiters in this situation. Nobody's going to be forcing their hand. They are in long-term contracts. They can decide as and when, right, now and no further. This is the squad. We're going with it. If you want a move, we'll talk about it again. And I think those players will have been made aware of this when they signed those long-term contracts. We're hopefully not going to be hit with a situation that the start of the COVID season when we had 5 or 6 players who were known because of all the leaks coming out, who were known to be unhappy and who felt that they had been promised moves and it didn't happen for various reasons. And without getting into too much detail, you could see that was reflected in the performance of some of those players in some of those games. We're a million miles away from that at the moment. This seems to be a settled, stable squad, and they all know what the score is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about, you always want to build from a position of strength, don't you? Celtic have maybe been guilty in the past of not doing that. And you don't want that to be the case this summer when you're sitting there with a good squad. You're getting positive investment from money in from Jota, at least 30 million from the Champions League, more if you pick up some points in there as well. It's, another sellout of season books, etc. There's not really any excuses why the club shouldn't be going out and spending money. And obviously, thankfully, they've brought 3 players in recently, 5 players in total. You could even say 6 if you say the confirmation of Tomoki Iwata. I know it was an obligation to buy, but it was still only recently confirmed in this transfer window. But yeah, I think fans will be maybe hoping for a wee bit more, but I'm feeling a bit more positive, Kevin, after the last few days in terms of the recruitment. I'm also quite happy the way that the Nawrocki deal's moved, and that we only found out about him probably not even last week. We really knew Celtic were interested in him. I think it was about Thursday or Friday. The medical was then done. Well, it was confirmed kind of Saturday or Sunday, and then we seen the picture on Monday that he was in Lennoxtown behind the scenes, and then he's confirmed this morning. So I think that's it. Hey, I know every transfer doesn't work like that. There's always different complications where the players are coming from. What clubs you're negotiating with, but I think that's kind of the ideal transfer link, isn't it? Really. The only thing that'd be better is maybe waking up and you've not one day in Celtic announced a player you didn't even hear of, but. I think overall, that's what you want. You don't really want stuff in the media for weeks and weeks, speculation, whereas the fact less than a week ago we didn't really know anything about this guy and now he's signed, that seems like the kind of best way to do business, doesn't it?
Yeah. We've also got an interesting situation with David Turnbull. People forget that he was really coming on to a game and we could see the quality that we'd all been told about before we signed him. And then he got that injury and he was replaced by O'Reilly. And because of O'Reilly's form, his appearances were fleeting. But, David Turnbull is a top quality player. And I still think he's got quite a lot to offer us. And Brendan Rodgers was the one who, it was Brendan Rodgers who brought him. He knows all about what he can do. And I'd like to think that he will be pushing for a place because, O'Reilly last season, I don't think was as good or as consistently good as he'd been previous season. And I'd like to think that Brendan will have had a quiet word with Turnbull and said, look, there's still, you can still make a contribution here. I just like the way he plays football. I like his balance. And I like his danger around the 18-yard box. It always gives us an extra option when we're looking for a goal against a really tight defence. His ability to shoot accurately from outside the box gives us something that we don't otherwise have.
Yeah, I think Turnbull does add something a wee bit different, and he does seem like maybe more of a Brendan Rodgers player and Ange Postecoglou player. I know obviously Ange didn't sign him; it was under Neil Lennon the season before. But yeah, I think he's got a lot to offer, Turnbull. He's another one that fits into that homegrown thing as well. I know it's not all just about that, but it is an important factor when you've got guaranteed Champions League football that you need to think about. Just obviously his contract situation, Kevin, he's only got a year left. So would you be keen to see him sign an extension?
Yeah, I would actually. But you know, if his agent will be pointing out to Celtic, well, you know, we know you can't give complete guarantees, but we would like to know that he's at that stage in his career when he can't afford to continue being a fringe player. So if a decent club come in for him, he would have to be interested if it's going to offer him regular football, even if it's a slight step back to go forward later, because he's still young. So again, Brendan's got a decision to make there, but my instinct is I like the look of him on the ball. He's been unlucky, and I think he deserves an extended run in the team to just show us what he can do.
Yeah, I think that there'll definitely be a decision to make at some point over that. But Brendan Rodgers, I think, was already maybe trying to get the best out of Turnbull. I think it was in the Gamble Saka game he started him in that sort of number 10 role, and he looked probably, I don't want to say he looked better than any game he played last season, because that's pretty harsh, firstly because he was unfortunate to not really be selected a lot of times, but it was definitely the best I'd seen him in that first 45 minutes for a while. And I know it's a friendly, you can't get too carried away. It's all about it's the result and how things go. It kind of suits fans whatever in a friendly. If you lose a game, you go, well, it was just a friendly. But if you win it, it's the best thing ever. But I thought he looked pretty impressive in that sort of different role to any sort of position he would have played under Ange. And yeah, I agree with you. I'm kind of excited to see what Turnbull's going to do this season. And to be honest, if you'd probably said that to me about a month ago, I don't want to sound harsh. I probably would have said he's maybe somebody that could be moved on. Whereas now I'm thinking he could be a real option. As I don't think anybody would dispute that O'Reilly's probably the main figurehead in that position, or Hatate or McGregor if he wants to play one of them a bit further forward. But I think Turnbull's going to be in there challenging. And as we mentioned with Nawrocki and Starfelt earlier, having players that can challenge in positions brings out the best. So yeah, I'm excited to see how Turnbull's going to get on this season.
Yeah, good.
So I think, guys, we'll maybe just leave it there for today. Thanks very much for your comments. Always appreciated. Kevin, thanks very much for joining us, mate.
No bother at all. Anytime. That was good.
Hopefully, the next time we get you on, there'll be maybe a wee bit more to talk about in terms of we'll be in the kind of meat and bones of the season.
Aye, we can pick over the bones of our unbeaten 100% start to the season, Aidan. No
of course. Fingers crossed, Kevin. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
Yeah, guys, just once again, for anybody that's interested, the ticker tape down below has the information with our latest subscription offer. Subscribe to the website, supporting top quality journalism from the club you all love. It includes calls and people like Kevin, tactical analysis, people like Alan Morrison, one of which is on the site today. He was looking at how Celtic used long balls last season, and it's how that's kind of like a secret weapon for the club. Maybe something Brendan Rodgers should stick with. There's also the newsletter article from Ryan in kind of defensive Carol Starfelt. Ryan, was addressing obviously the recent links that Starfelt had to Spartak Moscow, and why he kind of felt that some people that wanted Starfelt to leave was maybe a bit harsh in his opinion. So £18 a year, guys, currently is the deal we're offering, and we really appreciate it if you subscribe. Obviously, your subscriptions help us continue to be able to do videos like this, make content using StatsBomb, etc. So yeah, get yourself involved, guys, if you haven't already. www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Kevin, thanks again, mate. Always a pleasure.
Okay. Cheers, Aidan.
Cheers, guys. Me and Ryan will be back tomorrow.